unusual solidity that whereas the rest of the buildings had disintegrated, this one kept its original dimensions intact through half of its length. The south front was whole. Only the northern portion of the building had crushed in. But for some reason this combination of ruin and repair was more melancholy than the utter destruction of the rest of the ranch. The horseman regarded this sight with a shake of the head, and then looked again up the valley. But it would be difficult to continue. By this time it must have been sunset, and the storm dimmed the earth to the colors of late twilight. Every moment the wind freshened out of the north, picking up the drifts of rain and whirling them into gray ghost forms. To continue down a blind trail in the face of this gale with no definite destination was madness. The horseman resigned himself with a sigh to staying in the ruined barn until dawn. He rode the mare, therefore, through a fallen section of the south front of the structure and into what had once been the mow. Stale scents of moldy straw still lingered in it. Once inside, there was barely sufficient light to show the wanderer the dim outlines of the barn, and it was even more imposing in dimensions from within than from without. To the roof was a dizzy rise. A broad space extended on either side to the supporting walls. Half a regiment might bivouac here. Most important of all, the north gable was almost entirely blocked. That end of the building, though fallen, had not yet crumbled to the ground, and the broken roof formed a sort of enormous apron extending against the wind. As soon as he discovered this, the wanderer began at once to make systematic preparations for spending the night. He first rode the mare back into the open air to a rain rivulet where she was allowed to drink. Then he returned, dismounted, gathered some fragments of wood, and lighted a fire. The first leap of the yellow light transfigured the gloomy place. It started a shudder and dance of great shadows among the network of rafters above and in the corners of the building. It also showed the mare, from which the traveler now removed the saddle and rubbed her down, a bit of work which most of the other riders of the Rocky Mountains would not have thought. He dried her as well as he could, and, before paying the slightest attention to his own wants, he produced from his saddlebags a mixture of chopped hay and crushed barley, a provision for his horse, which he carried with him wherever he went. His glance wandered affectionately over her, for truly she was a beautiful creature. In color, she was a rich bay. Her stature was rather less than the average, for she was not more than 15 hands and 3 inches in height. But what she lacked in height, she made up in the exquisite nicety of her proportions. At first glance, she looked rather too fine for hard mountain work, but a little closer examination showed ample girth at the cinches, nobly sloped shoulders, and quarters to match. In fact, she could have carried a heavy weight, and the bulk of her owner was a trifle for her strength. He proved a slenderly made fellow as he turned away from the mare and threw more wood on the fire, a man of medium height, and in no way imposing physically. His carriage alone struck the eye. He was erect as a whipstock, bore his head high and proudly, and moved with a light, quick step, as though he had been forced to act quickly so often that the habit had formed and hardened on him. That alert and jaunty carriage would in itself have won him some respect, even if his name had not been Ronicky Doone, whose fame in the more southerly ranges was already a notable thing. Horse-breaker, mischief-maker, adventurer by instinct, and fighter for sheer love of battle, he carried on his young body enough scars to have decked out half a dozen hardy warriors of the mountains, but the scars were all he had gained. The quarrels he fought had been the quarrels of others, and, a champion of lost causes, the rewards of his actions went to others. Now he rolled down his blanket beside the fire, which he had built for the sake of warmth and good cheer rather than for cooking. His fare consisted of hard crackers, and was finished off with a draught of cold water from his canteen. Then he was ready for sleep. He found shelter at the north end of the mow. Here a great section of the disintegrating roof had fallen and stood end up, walling away a little room 6 paces in length, and something more than a half